Next up, we got the Bucks at the Saints. Jameis Winston had a pretty terrible showing last week against the Titans. Hopefully he'll do better against the Saints. However, they're in the Dome, which is obviously favoring the Saints. The Saints will be facing the worst defense, I think, in the league right now, unless the Bucks change up some things. So I think Drew Brees will have a pretty good afternoon. This will have some fantasy implications later on. However, both teams have a lot of issues, both offensively and defensively. I would actually stay away from betting on this game. The Saints are favored by 10 points. The over-under is 46.5. However, I think the Saints will come away with a W on this game. Again, I'd stay away from that betting pick. Next up, we got the 49ers at the Steelers. Last week, the Steelers' defense was terrible. Not sure how they let Gronkowski go uncovered. In any case, the 49ers look like they have a new offensive weapon with Carlos Hyde. He ran pretty well last week, and I have no reason to think he won't run pretty well this week against the Steelers. However, in this game, I like the home team. Main reason is I think the Steelers have had longer to prepare. 49ers are coming off a short week. They had a pretty big win over the Vikings. They will be traveling through time zones, and again, they're also going to be facing a division opponent next week. They may be looking forward to that game. I do like the Steelers in this spot. The spread's -5.5. Over-under is a 45. Next up, we got the Lions at the Vikings. It's always a good game. It's a division rival game. I was surprised to see the Vikings were favored, but I think that they actually can win this one. They're at home. They have the better start time instead of 10 p.m. like they did last week, and Peterson historically runs pretty well against the Lions. I think that he can continue to do that. Stafford also got lit up last week. We'll have to see how he does. It's always a question mark when a quarterback takes a rough hit, especially someone like Stafford. I do like the Vikings at -3. I'd be careful as there's a ton of money on the Lions. This always scares me. The Vikings are -3. The over-under is 43. Next up, we got the Patriots at the Bills. It's another division rival game between two longtime AFC East rivals. The Bills' defense looked great last week, and they looked tough. Tyrod Taylor was pretty good in his first start. He looked pretty efficient, and the Pats also looked pretty good against the Steelers. But then again, as I mentioned earlier, the Steelers had pretty awful defense, and I think that the Bills' defense will give Brady a challenge this week. Plus, Rex Ryan is a whopping 8-5 against the spread against Belichick, including a 10-point underdog playoff victory. These games always tend to be close, and in this close one, I think Rex Ryan will pull it out. I like the Bills. The spreads, the Patriots -1.5, over under 45. Next up, we got the Cardinals at the Bears. Cutler had a tough game against the Packers, but his coaches were pretty happy how he performed. I'm not sure how they were happy with how he performed when he hit about 50% of his passes and had one pick, but Forte played pretty well, and he is arguably their best weapon. I think he'll continue to play well. Unfortunately for the Cardinals, they lost Andre Ellington. However, I think they should be able to still move the chains. Though I like the Bears on this one to come back with a victory. They should bounce back after a loss to the Packers. It'll be the Cardinals -2, over under 45. Next up, I got the Titans at the Browns. This should be an interesting game. I think the big news of the game is Johnny Manziel will be starting for the Browns. For the Titans, obviously, you got Marcus Mariota, who had one of the best starts for a rookie in NFL history. I think he threw 4 touchdowns, no picks. Pretty good start for him, but again, he was facing one of the worst defenses in the Bucs. I still think that he'll do pretty well against the Browns because in this game he can actually use the run game. Sankey looks healthy, and I think that they should have pretty good success running the ball this week. I was going to make this my underdog pick of the week. However, I think Vegas got wind of how bad Manziel is and have dropped the spread. Browns opened up at -4, but now it's currently Titans at -1.5, so you've lost all your value. But I do think that Titans should win this one. I'd go with them. Next up, you got Chargers at the Bengals. Bengals' offensive line looked pretty good. Dalton had some time in the pocket, some good protection. This may bode well for them later on in the season. But this was against the Raiders. Chargers are a little better on their defensive line. They've come back from a big deficit, and their D also stepped up at the end. They may be able to carry this momentum over, but again, it's a new week. I don't like the Bengals at -3. It seems a little fishy. If you think about Bengals at -3, it's saying that the home team's getting 3 points, which is the Bengals, and that means they're even with the Chargers. I'm not quite sure about this. Again, the spread seems a little strange to me. If I had to pick, I'd take the Chargers. The spread's at Bengal -3, over under 46.5. Next up, we got the Rams at the Redskins. Doesn't look good for Redskins fans this week. They're facing a very tough defense, and I think they'll have their work ahead of them against the Rams. Deshaun Jackson's out. That means they're going to have to rely on Grant and Crowder to pick that up. And Morris is going to have to try to make up what they can't get also on the ground. It's going to be a tough game for them. The Rams, though they beat the Seahawks and Folks played decent, they had special teams help. Actually, a lot of special teams help. Makes me wonder. I do like the Redskins in this game at -1, over under 45. Next up, 41. Next up, we got Falcons at Giants. Matt Ryan had terrible pass protection this last game, but he still has Julio Jones, who's a beast. That man seems to be able to catch anything that you throw at him. They're coming off They're coming off a good win, but the Giants, on the other hand, are coming off a tough loss. I think that they had terrible clock management at the end of their game. Obviously, you heard all the people blaming Eli and Eli blaming himself. I'm not sure how you tell your running back not to run in. I could understand at certain points, but I think in that case he should have slid down rather than throwing the ball away. And if you don't know what I mean, just watch the end of the game. You'll see it just wasn't great clock management. In any case, I like the Falcons in this game. The spread's actually Giants -2.5, over under 51. Now we're going to move on to the afternoon games. First up, we have the Ravens at the Raiders. The Ravens really didn't have a great offensive showing for their first week. They scored 6 points offensively. They had 7 on special teams, making a grand total of 13. Didn't look good for them, but they have Flacco, so they should be able to pick that up. The Raiders, on the other hand, lost Carr last week. Apparently, he had a hand injury while he was trying to stiff arm. In any case, I think that we'll have to see how Carr does. It's one of those games I think that you have to stay away from because there's too many question marks. Ravens have a really high spread, so there's no value in this game. I think the Ravens will get the win. It's Ravens -6, over under 43.5. Next up, we got Dolphins at Jags. The Dolphins looked kind of sleepy last week. They won through special teams. Once again, another team that had a lot of special team help. Bortles is still developing on the Jaguars. He doesn't have much of an offensive line, so I wonder how this game's going to go for him. They have TJ Yeldon for the Jags, who looks to be a pretty good runner, maybe coming into his own, has some potential there. At this point, I like the Finns to come up with the win, but I would stay away from this game. The spread's pretty high. It's tough to bet on the Jaguars if you think that the Jaguars are going to cover. The Dolphins are at -6, over under 41.5. Next, we got Cowboys at Eagles. I think this is going to be a good game. These games always tend to be pretty entertaining. Phillies offensively look great in the second half. They look pretty well. I'm not sure why they didn't run DeMarco Murray more. But you may see more of him this week. They put a lot of money into him and a lot of investment. I'm not sure why they didn't use him, and I suspect they will. Cowboys, on the other hand, lost Dez Bryant, but I don't think this will affect them. They are a pretty good team. They have a lot of other weapons, and I suspect that they'll actually do pretty well. I think they'll move the chains and get some points, and actually I'm going to pick them to win this outright. This will be my underdog upset pick of the week. The spread is Giants -5.5. Over under 54.5, but again, I think the Cowboys can win this outright. Eagles 5.5, over under 54.1. I didn't mean to say Giants, Eagles, but I do think that the Cowboys can win this outright. Now on to the game of the week for me, Seahawks at Packers. Of course, you guys can probably tell in the background, I'm a very big Packers fan, and obviously the NFC Championship game last year was heartbreaking. But each year is its own year. Each game is its own game. Packers historically have been 7-1 against the Seahawks at home. The lone loss came to the Fail Mary, which, for those of you who don't know what that is in NFL history, you need to look it up. Pretty bad game. But that was their own lone loss. One of the other wins that the Packers have won against the Seahawks at home was the infamous Hasselbeck comment, "We want the ball and we're going to win." The Packers defense had some questions, but the offense didn't. They looked pretty good without Jordy Nelson. I think they'll continue to look good. They have a great system with Aaron Rodgers under quarterback. The Packers defense, however, has trouble with mobile quarterbacks, which Russell Wilson can be and probably will be. He doesn't have much other options at this moment, so I suspect that he'll be doing a lot of running around, which usually gives the Packers a lot of trouble, especially on third down. Another thing that I'm a little suspicious about is the hook on the spread. The spread is actually 3.5 for the Packers. I'm not sure why it's Packers at -3. I think both teams are pretty even, and so I could understand a spread of -3. But the half point has me questioning what Vegas knows that we don't all know. I think that I'd actually probably have to say that the Seahawks may cover this spread, but I do think that it's going to be a good game. Overall, again, it's Packers at -3.5 over under 49, but I do think the Seahawks will cover this one. I'm going to skip Monday Night Football just simply because of the fact that I don't have too much to say just yet. I do think that the Colts will win and cover the spread of -7, but I really don't have much other information to talk about that one. We're going to skip that one this week. On to fantasy football. Again, I'm learning this year. This is going to be a learning process for all of us. I appreciate your suggestions to help make me better, but I'm starting FanDuel to see how that goes. FanDuel, if you guys don't know, is a little trickier than season-long fantasy leagues. You have a budget each week that you use to make a team. You pick a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, tight end, kicker, defense. Long story short, it gets a little tricky because you think you can pick playmakers, but then you lose money on the other end to pick other players down the list. This week, I picked Drew Brees at quarterback for $8,900. Andrew Luck would have been another good choice for the same price. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, I picked Carlos Hyde and TJ Yeldon. They were respectively $7,000 and $6,500 each. For wide receiver, I went with Julio Jones at $8,800. I think he's still a playmaker. Will make some points this week. I went with Jarvis Landry at $7,100 and James Jones at $5,400. I picked up Jimmy Graham for tight end at $7,100. Again, I think he'll score some points. He's good for usually a touchdown. Janikowski is my kicker at $4,700, and I took the Packers D as kind of a backup if the game actually goes the other direction. At least I can make some points with hopefully some defensive and special teams play. I just want to close out by saying I hope nobody goes crazy on these picks. Again, I try to do the best I can, but none of this is meant to be taken as 100% accurate. Hope you guys have fun. I really appreciate you guys listening to my video and hearing me talk. If you guys have any suggestions, input, changes, feel free to email me, sundayfootballwithsundeep@gmail.com. I will be reading the emails and I'll be reading comments. I'll try to do the best I can to reply. Hope you guys have a good week. Go Packers.